when I debug something, what's in my context window? You realize how complicated these problems are because you have to build for this agent some working memory around all the fixes that you've done in the past and all the common error patterns that you've seen and what the purpose is of all these workflows. And then you have to do it in a way that it can fit in the context window so it doesn't get stupid.
Welcome to Triangle Tweener Talks, a weekly podcast by builders for builders where we explore the startup journey from the idea to the exit and all the lessons in between with an exclusive focus on founders from the Triangle region of North Carolina. Now here's your host, serial founder, and general partner of the Triangle Tweener Fund, Scott Wingo.
First, a huge thank you to our gold sponsors. Today we are featuring Robinson Bradshaw. With national reach and deep Triangle ties, Robinson Bradshaw delivers high-touch, sophisticated legal counsel to emerging growth companies and venture investors. We'd also like to recognize our silver sponsors. Today, we are featuring Bank of America. Bank of America's transformative tech group provides the stability and scalability that tech companies need to rapidly grow today and into the future. Thank you again to all of our sponsors for supporting Triangle Tweener Talks and the entire Triangle startup community. It takes an ecosystem to build a thriving community, and sponsors like these are very valuable, and they contribute their time and also help sponsor things like the Triangle Tweener Talks and Triangle Tweener Times. Thank you. This week, we're going to have part 2 of my conversation with Dave Shaner, founder and CEO at Offline. In part 1, we talked about the founding story of Offline, the journey so far and what he's building there. He hinted at some of his automation pieces. And also we talked about how he loves to carry a whiteboard around him. In this part 2, we're going to dig into all the really interesting things Dave and his team have done with AI to automate not only his personal life, but his business. You're going to want to take notes on this one. I learned a ton, and I already have a bunch of new interesting tools that I'm going to try and experiment with. Enjoy part 2 of my conversation with Dave Shaner. All right, let's talk about your AI journey. When did it start? You mentioned you were at kind of 34 people, and now you're doing a lot of that work with 2. That didn't happen overnight. Chunk that up for us, and I definitely want to dig into where you are today and what you've learned recently, because I believe there's been this huge step function up in the tools that allow you to do a lot in the last 6 months that you couldn't do in the prior 2 years.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think if I back out of it, I talked about what I consider to be kind of the preconditions for AI adoption, which I think are just like an appreciation for process and an appreciation for what information has to be present to solve a problem. So process and context, like I think of those as like two Venn diagram, or like a Venn diagram, and AI is in the middle. And so for us, I think this is probably true for most people that started using AI early, like 2022, 2023. It was just copywriting, right? It was like, oh, this is cool. Like it wrote a poem. Or it wrote a limerick. And so I think phase 1 was like the AI copywriting intern. And at Offline, we made a lot of content. We did a lot of emails, a lot of social media, a lot of like life cycle marketing. And we started adopting AI as what I would just say as a copywriting intern, so that the people that were finalizing the copy just had somebody to kind of riff with. And what I noticed very early on in our little AI journey was that there were people who would use those very early versions of ChatGPT, and they would like throw in some unstructured thing, like write me a blog post, and then it would spit something back out, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's trash. This whole thing is dumb. Like I'm a better writer," right? And then there were the types that would kind of say, okay, well, maybe write me a blog post is too big. What does it actually mean to write a blog post? Right? Well, first I got to come up with a topic, and then I got to write an outline, and then I got to do this and that. And so it's kind of a fork around like who believed that the model was smart and that they needed to just get better at talking to it, and who would throw something in and assume that the model was dumb and just kind of like walk away.
Yeah.
And so what we started doing pretty early on is like trying to really deconstruct, okay, how do you get a model to like write in our voice? What does that even mean? What is our voice? How do we even define what the heck that is, right? And it also, the first time we started using it, it sort of also kicked off this other thing that everybody's familiar with. It's like the AI whiplash of, oh my gosh, ChatGPT, like it can write all of our content. And you have this unrealistic expectation. And then you're like, it actually can do nothing. It's crappy. And like, we should just keep running the business the way we do, right? There's these massive oscillations between AI can do any, like every time a new tool comes out, it's like, this is the end, AI can do everything. And then this like disillusionment with like, oh, actually it's still dumb in a lot of ways. So phase one was copywriting. We kind of quickly adopted that and like got sort of to the, I think the leading edge of how to get that into our workflows. And then was the coding, right? Like that's when things started to get really interesting. I think somewhere around the middle of 2024 is when I remember
probably Cursor. If it was probably what got you there. Yeah,
correct. Yeah. So what ended up happening with coding? So with copywriting, I was all over that. The barrier to entry was like very low. With development, I'm not a software engineer. And so my perception was that like the barrier was a little higher. And the way I was keeping up with that was I was just on X at like 11 o'clock at night, like binging these videos of people, making apps in Cursor or whatever. Right. And so I started using V0 like fairly early on, and I would like sit down and, mess around with it. And early on, again, you would like figure out where it starts glitching out. Like I called it like, where does the sidewalk end? Like a new tool would come out, I would start playing with it. Very quickly, I would kind of find like, okay, here's the limit where like it's now making junk. And then I would get back to my normal job because like it wasn't actually producing business value.
Yeah.
Towards the end of 2024, I was seeing like a lot of crazy stuff on Twitter. And so what I started doing is throwing stuff over the wall at anybody that was technical at offline. And hey, you should watch this. Like, why aren't we doing this? Like, you know how that goes, right? You get these like leaders who get obsessed with something and they're just like poking and prodding their team and like, what's wrong with us? Why are we behind? The thing that actually changed that was at the end of 2024, I decided to download Cursor and just try to make my own app. And there was a thing that we had always wanted to do at offline for years, which was to integrate with the restaurant's point of sale systems. And I'm like technical enough that I could Google around and see that some of them had APIs, and this was like theoretically possible. So if I'm not mistaken, that was around the time ChatGPT 4.0, I don't know how you say it, 4.0 had just come out, and Cursor was out. And it was like this kind of coalescence of a couple different things. And so I remember walking around on the balcony at my office and having this like hour-long conversation with ChatGPT about how to integrate with Stripe's API. And I was blown away by the output. It was starting to write a little bit of code, and it was giving me all, it was like telling me all these things. I copied the entire API documentation from Stripe and like fed it in. And for about 2 or 3 weeks after that, I was spending 10, 12 hours a day in Cursor trying to get this thing to work. And I finally got to the point where I could authenticate with a Stripe account. I could pull in transactions. I could separate out offline transactions from non-offline transactions. I could put them in a dashboard. The dashboard looked good. And that was the first, like, I felt like I got hit by a bus moment. Mm-hmm. And I grabbed Taylor, who was our head of product, and Paige, who ran engineering. And I was like, hey, you guys need to see this. Like, this is not just me posting random stuff or like reading random stuff on Twitter. This is like real. Like I am building a full stack application myself. In the process of doing that, I was using Cursor. I was using Supabase for the first time. I was starting to understand like React for the first time. And I just all of a sudden felt like we were years behind where we needed to be. And that there was this new like emergent layer of apps that would let people ship like really, really fast. And we needed to catch up.
Yeah.
So that kind of tees up like going into 2025. And I guess I'm curious, like if you have any questions or points from that year, but from there it was just like full steam ahead.
I want to spend a chunk of our time digging into what you're doing now to kind of like hear what's working.
Yeah, let me run through what happened in 2025 then. So
yeah,
I basically built my first full stack app end of 2024. That was, and this is something I think everybody should listen to. It was me, the founder, sitting down and building my own app that catalyzed everything. Because then it wasn't like, oh, David's talking about AI again. It was like, oh crap, like if he can do that, I better figure it out.
And you solved a problem that had been kind of a thorn in your side for a while. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was both.
It wasn't random. It wasn't like
that's right.
Selfie app or anything.
Hey, look at this! It planned a trip to San Francisco for me. It wasn't that. So what ended up happening, if you go back and look at our GitHub, we had like one active repo in 2024, and by the middle of 2025, we had like 6, and the number of commits in 2025 was like double what it was in 2024. Because we basically what we started doing is every problem that we had inside the business, we just started turning into some sort of application or automation. So I got really, really deep in N8N. And I think a fundamental thing that we figured out that I think is valuable for anybody listening is that we decided pretty early on to not try to do this inside of offline's like monolithic code base. We ended up building an internal API and pulling any data that we needed to build any sort of like internal tool or external tool. We would pull out of our monolithic database and monolithic code structure, because the way AI is really fast is when you're starting from scratch. It's really at that point, and still today, I think it struggles when you just throw it into some huge code base and it has to understand all that context. When you take the data out and you go around it, you can go lightning fast. And so we built a self-service events app. We built a app for our content creators for like picking up shoots and getting paid. We built an app for monitoring and scraping Instagram. It was just like everything that had been a thorn in our side for the last however many years. We just built an app for it.
Cool.
So that was kind of the story of 2025. And then
when you say app, this is just a mobile website or like actually a on-device Apple Store app?
A mobile website, right?
Okay.
So
responsive and all.
Yeah, exactly. So like a subdomain Vercel hosted app that either enables something for restaurants or makes things faster for us.
Were they all purple?
At first, yeah.
There's an interesting article I'll send you about why are all vibe coding is purple. It's like some open source CSS thing that has been in the training data and like replicated 1,000 times, so that the training set of data makes the engines think that everyone develops in purple. Apparently, Anthropic did something to exercise that out.
They did, yeah. They launched a front-end design skill that if you go read the skill file, it's like in all caps, like never use purple.
Don't use purple.
Yeah, exactly. So what does it look like today?
Are you still on N8N?
Yes.
Do you do your own workflows on that, or isn't there a meta way to kind of just tell it to go do the workflows now?
So there's an MCP that can create workflows for you. I think it has something to do with the training data, but I found Claude, like Opus 4.5, to be fairly spotty with N8N. It's pretty good at putting together like a simple workflow. So again, the equivalent of, hey, I like vibe coded Trello last night. Look at this. If you're just saying, hey, take an email, and every time I get this email, send me this Slack, and if it's like a 5-node thing, it's not. It can rip that together pretty quickly. When you start wanting to automate like business functions, like, hey, I want to build my own like SDR that is good. That's really hard, and it really struggles with that, and you kind of have to, do a lot of tricks to get it to do what you want it to do.
let's spend a second for listeners. I want to back up a little bit and talk about orchestration layer, how you think about it. And then I'd also love to know, did you try Zapier and Apollo and any of the, the other one is, what is it, Made or Make, one of those? Which ones have you tried and why do you use n8n? So explain to people what that thing does.
What n8n does?
The orchestration. I call it the orchestration layer of this stack that you're talking about.
I think the early landing pages for Zapier were like, if this happens, then do this thing. So if you think of like the internet as a whole bunch of triggers that are passing information around, that's kind of what this orchestration layer does. It's like, if something happens over here in this application, we're going to take a packet of data and we're going to translate it and move it around and put it somewhere else. So to give a couple tangible examples, when the website Triangle Food Blog publishes their most recent blog post, we're going to take it, we're going to use AI to extract each individual piece of news from that article. We're going to enrich it so that it's qualified or not qualified, and then we're going to stick it in our HubSpot CRM and potentially do outreach with it. Like, that's an example. And instead of having to build an entire app for that, you can just build an n8n workflow that connects all of those different systems together. And when you run it on n8n, it costs you like a penny. And the benefit, I think, of that orchestration layer is that you're not building these like full stack applications, and so you can iterate on them super fast. Like if I want to tweak the way I'm qualifying a lead, all I have to do is open up that qualification workflow, open up the AI node that's in there, and change the prompt a little bit and hit save, and then it'll like run that way forever. And so it allows for, I think, rapid iteration and deployment around some of these like core business processes. And so where I started getting obsessive about it is like, even though vibe coding is really fast, a lot of things in your business don't need a full-on application. They just need glue code. They just need orchestration. And one area that's like ripe with that stuff is sales operations. Like you're moving around so much data, you're moving around leads, you're cleaning up mess in a CRM, you're automating a bunch of stuff. And what I ran into was, HubSpot's native automation stuff just sucked, and it continues to suck. And so
you got to build all these. Just a drip campaign is you got to build all these filters that cascade, and it's like super complicated. Yeah. Time check. Are you good to go a little over? I don't want to step. Okay. All right. Okay.
But what HubSpot's good at is like they have a really robust API that's up almost all the time, right? And so
it's a good store of data.
Fine, HubSpot. We will take the data out. We will do what we want with it elsewhere, and then we will shove it back in, right? And so that's kind of the orchestration layer. As for Make versus Zapier versus n8n, I don't really know what the thing was. It's hard when you look back sometimes at software, like why you switched. But one of the things I remember in n8n that I think Zapier has since fixed is there's these things you can put in a workflow called code nodes. And so let's say, again, I scrape Triangle Food Blog, I get all this like stuff, and then I want AI to do something with it, and then I want to put it in HubSpot. Not to get too technical, but like the structure of the data as it moves through that workflow needs to change, right? The JSON needs to change. And that was actually a hard thing to do before AI, because you needed to know how to write JavaScript, and you needed to understand JSON really well. And like you needed to write this little node that would say, okay, I'm going to take this AI stuff and then I'm going to match it to the HubSpot schema so that when we hit the API, it's all clean. And what AI is incredible at is just saying, all right, the data looks like this. I need it to look like this. Write me the JavaScript that does it.
Yep.
And n8n made it really easy to inject these like JavaScript transformations into your flows. And that unlocked for me, like you can pretty much do anything with data. And then the other thing was pricing. n8n is like super, super cheap once you get stuff into production. We were doing thousands and thousands of runs, and I was paying like $60 a month. And and Zapier still had this legacy pricing that was like pretty expensive. And it also has an open source community of like all these different connections. So it was one of those things where I got won over by like one feature, and then I just never looked back.
Yeah, sounds like you're a little more technical, so that didn't intimidate you. A lot of people find the user interface complex, and like the JSON thing you talked about. They're like, I don't know what that is, and it scares me. Yeah, but you're like, let me get my fingers on the metal.
Yeah. Hey, ChatGPT, what's JSON?
Yeah. 6 days later.
Exactly.
So HubSpot's in the middle. Let's talk about this AI SDR. Say more about that. So are you qualifying? Is this? I imagine this is restaurants or our consumers, subscribers too. Or both?
So I've been building it in pieces, and there's a lot of software services that say that they are out of the box AI SDRs, and they're really not good for our use case. I don't know if they're good in general, but they're not good for our use case because, you take something like Clay or whatever, like it's basically like a really good version of those email hunter. Like it like finds people for you, and then in theory it like does some enrichment and does outreach, right? But the thing, I'll go all the way back to what I said about processing context. So in order for an AI SDR to be good, and for any SDR to be good, right, they have to have a lot of context about who they're talking to.
Yeah.
And it's not just the context about who that person is. It's the context about any history that you have with that person, and whether they're a current customer, and whether maybe they have a support ticket out because they hate you. And like, so a good SDR has all this context in their head when they're making that phone call, and they're applying that information in every single interaction, and they're always recalibrating. And I think the AI SDR software market is like not there yet. It has a very thin understanding of all of that. And it's mostly because companies themselves don't really have their handle on that data. Like their CRMs are a mess, their stuff isn't connected. And so what I started with was, cool, I'm gonna scrape all this information about restaurants. I'm gonna get it all into HubSpot. I'm gonna use that to shape some outreach emails and like enroll people in sequences, and like boom, I'm off to the races. And I've got like, I can email 13,000 restaurants every day. What I realized very quickly was that like the data problem underneath that is like really gnarly. And I would run into all these problems that I'm talking about. I would go to email, hey, this, a new restaurant just opened up in North Hills, and my AI SDR is ready to email them. And then I find out it's just a new location of a restaurant we already work with, and I'm getting ready to send an email that makes me look stupid, right? Or it's a larger group that told us to never email them again like a week ago, and I'm getting ready to email them again. So what I found N8N to be a really good tool for this, because you can break the AI SDR problem up into like all the different component parts. So one component's collecting the data, one component's qualifying it, one component's looking inside your CRM and pulling in context or cleaning up your CRM if it's a mess. And if you can get all that right, then finally at the end, you earn the right to like enter them into a sequence. Right. Yep. And so I've been working my way through that problem for about 5 months now, and it's fascinating.
Another thing you learn about AI is when you first do it, you kind of like have the steps in your head, and you want to build like this mega boss agent that goes and does everything. But the biggest limiter in AI is context window. And if you build that boss agent, he's going to get lost on step 8 of 12 and then go off into the ether. And so you have to automatize it and say, all right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to research the client. And then you take that and you bake it into like the tightest little context, make it really tight as part of the process. Cause you only want to use 1/10 of the context window if you've got 8 steps, and give it room for extra headroom. So I don't know if you're doing that deliberately, but that's one of the nice things about, the way you're doing it is each of those little steps can live within the context window, and it probably has an output that is, a very good, very compressed piece to go on to the next piece.
I was going to say, I feel like we can't end this talk without me at least showing one whiteboard thing.
Yeah. Let's whiteboard it up.
Yeah. Well, I was going to show you a whiteboard. I'll just illustrate it since most people are listening anyway. But I sat down, I was using TL Draw, right? And I was doing exactly what you're talking about, where I was like, okay, I want to, now I have all these N8N workflows, and they're all running all the time, but who's managing them, right? Like right now I'm managing them. And so if something breaks, I'm debugging it. Or if I need a new workflow, I'm creating it. And so I sat down and tried to whiteboard out what would an N8N like sales ops manager actually do? Like what would the job description be for that person? And how do I decompose it like make it as atomic as humanly possible? Like when I debug something, what's in my context window, right? Like what am I, like I see a bug on N8N and I remember, oh shoot, that is the same bug that I saw 2 days ago. This is the second time this has happened. I probably need to do something about this. Or I changed this thing yesterday and it actually caused this other bug. I remember what I did yesterday, so I know how to shortcut and fix this, right? So when you start to be able to like take these things apart and think about them that way, you realize how complicated these problems are, because you have to build for this agent some working memory around all the fixes that you've done in the past and all the common error patterns that you've seen and what the purpose is of all these workflows. And then you have to do it in a way that it can fit in the context window so it doesn't get stupid, right? And so like right now, I have a daily workflow that copies all of my N8N runs from the last 24 hours and stores them locally in my file tree so that an agent can grep its way through them without using API calls. And it can save a ton of tokens and it can like find the error faster and using less context, right? And then there's another thing that logs every time I make a change to a workflow so that it can also have a history, a very short abbreviated history of all the changes, because those are kind of the two things that a human has. Like they kind of know where everything is without having to spend a whole day on it. Mm-hmm. And they know what they did before so they can draw on that experience.
So let's talk about the AI SDR. So they're going to call a restaurant group. So they're going to email a restaurant group. They start off by, is there a trigger in HubSpot that kind of says, we're going to run so let's say let's just say you're going to launch in a new city or something to kind of keep it clean. Do you go into HubSpot, find the data, get it in HubSpot, and then HubSpot is the thing that drives this? Or like, who's the boss of the SDR?
So right now where the sidewalk ends for us is that the AI, the last step of the process right now is that the AI SDR generates what we call an outreach brief. So it has the trigger of why we're reaching out. It has everything that we know about the company. It has all the contact history with anybody that we've contacted. And it has a recommended who we should contact and what the email should be. And right now, Steve, our head of sales, is the human in the loop that's helping me validate how correct those briefs are. And it's taken 5 months to get to the point where those briefs are like more correct than not. Wow. And so probably in, late February, we'll be ready to start moving to the next phase, which is just letting the agent send and correcting it after the fact versus getting in the way up front. But that just gives you an idea of like how complex it was to just get to the point where the outreach briefs are correct, 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
Right. Because like even take a new city. So let's say we launched in Sacramento or we launched in Atlanta, somewhere we're not, right? If we went and indexed all the restaurants in that city, we would actually find that we probably already work with a material number of restaurant groups that are operating in those cities, right? Which is why, like, that's what you start to see the more you get in this data layer, like it's all connected, right? And it's like, oh, great, like we already have like 20 or 30 locations that we can bring online right away. We just need to send the email and know that they're all connected, because a lot of times they're in these like big holding groups, and you can't find it unless you Google a bunch of stuff. And so, like the way we'll actually orchestrate it afterwards is my hunch is that we will not drive it through HubSpot, because I won't want to enroll someone in a sequence. I think a sequence is a very outdated paradigm. Yeah. Because it's predetermined. And what a good SDR does is they recalibrate every new interaction. Like if they send the first email and it bounces, they do something very different than if they send the first email and it's open 2 times and nobody replies. Or they send an email and they find out that it's the wrong contact and that they need to contact somebody else. Like there's this constant recalibration. And to this day, the way things like HubSpot handle that is like they just follow a predetermined pattern until somebody responds usually, and then they hand it over to a human.
Yeah.
And I don't want that because that's not really automated.
What other things have you built that, sounds like this is the one you're like really chewing on right now. Is there one that you did that you would, you can kind of tell a story of what it's done to tell us how you went from 34 to 2. Like what has caused that?
So one of them was like a business realization, and the other one was getting a lot more efficient with the restaurant side of the business, which is where all the like automation and stuff lives. Mm-hmm. So let me think about how to tee this up the right way. So there were two big sources of headcount for us. One was in every city we operated a social media account. We had somebody on the ground in that market that was building that account. And we had this like fundamental assumption that that account was necessary to win new business and to keep the business that we had, because it gave us kind of a masthead and a brand in that city. Mm-hmm. And we'll find out when we launch in new cities if that was right or not. But we at least know now that if those accounts sit there and kind of atrophy and aren't really being used for a year or two, it doesn't seem to really affect our close rate, right? And so that was kind of a business realization. And so what ended up happening there is like as we were cash constrained and did layoffs, or as we had natural attrition, we just like never rebuilt that team. So that took down a big chunk of headcount. The other one was around the like SDR, so the lead gen side, the account executive side, and the partnership manager side. So the whole kind of like sales infra. And one of the biggest unlocks was when you have a small product and engineering team, we were constantly having to make trade-offs between do we like improve the consumer side or do we improve the restaurant side? And so on the restaurant side, we had a ton of stuff that was human hand-holding. Last year, because of all the advances, we decided to build just an entire, B2B customer-facing software product where everything from the contract all the way through to like the approval of their content and the metrics and everything was all in like one place for the restaurant, so that we don't really need like account management per se. The restaurant can do more and more self-service onboarding and more like monitoring of their performance on their own. And that was a quote unquote like vibe coded app that just brought together a lot of things that we were having to do manually for the restaurant. The SDR stuff I think has been a big thing for us. Even things like generating kind of case study reports showing the restaurants like how offline's performing. We didn't have dashboards for them. We didn't have like a way to thread together a lot of different really compelling data that a CSM would talk about on a call. So I would say the big theme has been using AI to build software that then replaces parts of the process that were like overly manual.
And you didn't have the engineering capacity to do that before, but now you had a list of nice to have and you never got to it. You had to just like chew at the must have.
Correct. Yes, that's exactly right. And so, we were able to just take on more of that engineering backlog than we were able to before.
I've seen you write about an event planning app or system. Like is that like the restaurant scheduling thing, or like what are these events that it's doing?
So Offline does a lot of events with restaurants. Like we do these, we call them like weekday takeovers. So you go back to the problem I talked about originally with extra capacity in a restaurant. And a lot of restaurants are like slow on a Tuesday or Wednesday. And so they'll just shut the whole place down, and Offline will like fill it up with 100, 150 guests that are all coming from Offline. And our old way of doing that in 2023, 2024 was we would have a couple of sales calls with the restaurant to explain the value proposition, get them to buy in. We would have a planning call where we would plan the event. We would have an account person that was like monitoring the progress of that event and how it was selling, and just like very human orchestration of this entire thing. Combination of AI and again, business realization, like realizing, we can actually explain the value prop of these events like pretty well with a landing page. And if we have a pretty sophisticated form that we can build that does an intake of everything that we would ask that restaurant and allows them to choose from some formats and explains why, what the pros and cons are of these formats, we get like pretty good data out of that. And then, like once they tell us the event they want to run, we already have data from the offer we're running with them, and AI can take that, the picture and the video and the write-up about the restaurant that you normally offline members get $20 off at. They can take that, and with like a pretty good prompt, they can generate the event copy, right? And then we can put it in a dashboard where like they can authorize the launch and they can monitor ticket sales and they can do like all these things. And so it was another process that started out as, this is how offline does events, right? Top to bottom. And we just took chunk by chunk by chunk and either automated it or turned it over to the restaurant and made it their thing using a self-service platform. It's the same thing we were talking about with kids, right? It's like, well, we just left the house with one shoe, right? In the events world, it's like, we just launched the event with the wrong date. We could make that our problem, or we could just show the restaurant and say, are you sure you want to launch this event? Are all the details correct? And they are capable adults. They can look at it and they can see.
And is all that done with, I know you vibe coded a piece of it, but is the orchestration of the events all on N8N and what other, I guess, all right, are you using Cursor or Claude Code at this point to build apps? And then also, what else are you using other than N8N that people could kind of think about using?
So we're using Claude Code for pretty much everything. Me and Paige and Taylor. And my normal day now is I probably start up between 3 and 5 instances of Claude Code. And I just have them working on different things. So you mentioned this earlier, Scott. You said things have really changed recently with the capabilities, right? And we go back to when Opus 4.5 was launched inside of Claude Code, which was like November 25th, I think, of last year. And I've just started calling it the singularity. Like that's what it is to me.
Whoa. Okay. That was the day.
People have their own definition of that. Like my definition is I can open up Claude Code. I can say, hey, here's the transcript from my board meeting. I need to turn this into a follow-up email. I need to get some data out of Carta. I also need to build this feature for this app. Like I just take that to-do list that I would have made for myself and I put it in Claude Code. And what'll happen is like, it'll bump up against something where it's missing the process, like which has become skill files, or the context, which has become data connections. And it'll say, oh, David, like I'd love to get that, option agreement knocked out for you, but I don't have access to your Carta data. And I'm like, cool, I'll download it all and stick it in a local repo for you. Now, can you do it? No, can you give me an example of a previous option agreement? Yeah, sure. Now I've put that in there in the templates, and like, can you update your skill file so you know how to do this the next time? And so I have a repo I work out of now called Chief of Staff, and inside of Chief of Staff, I've probably got 70 or 80 skills that I've accumulated. And then I've got all my API credentials to all the different tools that it needs to have access to. And it's just like, there's really not many things that it can't do now with API access and the skill files. And every time I bump up against one, I do it for the first time, fumble through it, and then kind of harden it up into a skill file that I just add. And that becomes what it references next time. And so it's like this whole other way of working now where what I might have gone to ClickUp or Notion or something for it, like our whole company is becoming a GitHub repo. Like me and Taylor were talking about this last week where we're like, we should probably move our company processes into a GitHub repo because really, it just needs to be something that agents can read and write out of. It doesn't make sense for it to be in ClickUp anymore.
Yeah.
And our product roadmap should just be a markdown file that, Claude can just visualize when we need to talk about it. So it's very strange. Like we're definitely pretty far, I guess, in right now on moving all the business context into a file structure and then allowing Claude to kind of like crawl around in there so it can solve more and more problems.
Have you caught the ClaudeBot / MoltBot / OpenClaw bug yet?
I've been watching from the sidelines so far,
Okay.
with a lot of FOMO. I've got a Mac Mini on the way that gets there on Monday just to tinker with it.
Yeah, you're next week. We'll have to do another podcast and see how your experience went. I need to spend some time and get back to command line. Like I spent 20 years in CLI, and I spent 20 years out. I need to go refresh my CLI tool. I don't do a lot of Claude code. And my go-to is Manus. Manus does like a lot of the stuff that you're talking about for me. But yeah, I worry about the security part of it, but having it on a separate box is a good idea. It's on my list.
Yeah, like what I've heard people doing is they just kind of make all new accounts for it so that if it leaks all your stuff, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of
email it. They forward what they want. Yeah.
You can kind of go wild with it. But when I saw it resonated quite a bit because that is kind of what Claude Code has become for me.
I think you'll find what you're doing. I mean, it would be cool to text with Claude Code, and some people have set that up and things, but it's just a lot. A lot of it is the communication paths and things like that just make it like that much easier. Where, it could be you wake up at night and you have some wacky idea, you could just text it. Yeah.
Well, whenever you want to dig into the command line, we could do a little co-work and I could show you my chief of staff setup.
Does your chief of staff, is it just a storage area or does it do stuff?
Yeah, it's just it's a repo that I launch Claude Code inside of. And then it has inside of chief of staff, it has, all of Offline's GitHub repos, all of my personal, all my crazy family stuff is in there. So that way, no matter what I tell it, it can kind of it can grep its way through and find what I'm looking for.
But it's not, it doesn't have an agent that's scheduling meetings or anything like that for you.
No, that's what I'm hoping the Mac Mini will be, is like, I'll basically have the Mac Mini with Caffeinate on and it'll just stay running all the time. And that way, like you're saying, if I'm on the go and I want to text my chief of staff, like I can do it that way. And then I don't have all the security issues with like ClaudeBot.
Dave, I could talk another hour. I want to be conscious of your time. Really appreciate it. I learned a ton. And I'm excited to see what you do with ClaudeBot. If people want to follow your adventures, I follow you on LinkedIn, but I know you're in other places. What's the best place to follow all your agentic craziness?
I put most of my stuff on LinkedIn. I would just say there or just email me. So David at letsgetoffline.com. I'm happy to jam on this stuff with anybody.
Yeah, and tell us about your podcast. Do you have a podcast? Are you're a frequent guest? I got it. Okay. Earlier you said I do a lot of podcasting. I thought you actually have a podcast.
Not yet.
You should start I know there's a lot of that out there. There's probably an angle like a practitioner's guide to using all this AI stuff. There's a lot of people talk about AI news and things, which is okay, but there's not enough. Lenny has this subpod called How I AI that I really like, and I've learned a lot of tips from that. You would be able to do kind of like a startup CEO's guide to AI or something. I'll put in a vote I would listen to that. If you did that, I would listen to it.
Oh, that's a good vote. I thought about
at least one listener.
I thought about doing a Substack because I do hammer out a lot of articles and they just kind of go out into the ether. But I love listening to stuff, so I don't know if I want to read anymore. So yeah.
If you ever want to open a little sub channel on Tweener Talks about this stuff, we have it all set up for you.
Yeah, that'd be really fun. I'll follow up on that.
Cool. Good seeing you. Really appreciate the time.
Talk soon.
Triangle Tweener Talks is hosted by Scott Wingo, presented and produced by Triangle Tweener Fund, with creative assets and design support from our friends at Walk West. That's it for today's episode. A big thank you to our guests, sponsors, and the team that makes this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves the startup stories coming out of the Triangle. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time on Triangle Tweener Talks.